In this video, we're going to focus on how do you solve an absolute value equation. So before we get started, do the prior knowledge check and see what you remember about absolute values. You can pause the video. Okay, so if you remember, absolute value really just means distance from 0. So when we're trying to find the absolute value of 3, we're really asking how far away is 3 from 0, which hopefully is obvious. It's just 3 spaces away. So the absolute value of 3 is 3, okay? Now for negatives, it works the same way, but when we're talking about distance, distance can't be negative. So the distance that negative 3 is from 0 is also 3 spaces. So that answer is 3. So you might have heard before that absolute value just makes everything positive. Really what it does is it's saying what the distance is, and distance is always positive. So kind of right, kind of wrong. Okay, so for building knowledge, if we know that the absolute value of 3 is 3 and the absolute value of negative 3 is 3, then see if you can figure out number 1. So for this one, we would know that the absolute value of 5 is 5 because it's 5 spaces from 0, and the absolute value of negative 5 is 5 because it's 5 places from 0. So we're going to get 2 answers, positive 5 and negative 5. Okay? With that same idea, see if you can figure out number 2. That's a little trickier. So what we want is the absolute value of 12 is going to be 12, and the absolute value of negative 12 is going to equal 12. Okay, so we need to figure out what could I plug in for x that would make this part positive 12 or negative 12. Okay, so hopefully we know that 2 times positive 6 gives me the positive 12, and then 2 times negative 6 gives me negative 12. So both of those will work. All right, last one. This one's a little bit of a trick because absolute value we just talked about is distance from 0, and distance is always positive. So if we have absolute value equals negative 5, that's impossible. Okay? So this is no solution, and we're actually going to learn something called empty set. So empty set is another way of writing no solution, and it looks like the symbol I just wrote. Okay. So before we move on to doing some more difficult problems, let's go over a little bit of vocabulary. So 2 main words, extraneous solutions. You can think of this like extra solutions. So when we do absolute value equations, we always need to plug our answers back in and make sure that it works. If it doesn't work, if when you plug the answers in, you get different numbers on both sides of the equation, then it's an extraneous solution, and we're going to cancel it out. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit. And then empty set we just talked about. Empty set is another way of saying no solution, and we can use this symbol. So it just makes it easier to write. Okay? So we started with some quick little examples. Now we're going to actually go into solving some multi-step absolute value equations. Okay? So again, we're focused on how do we do that. The first thing we're going to do is isolate the absolute value. Isolate just means that we're getting the absolute value by itself. Okay? So we're going to move all the other numbers. Then we're going to write 2 cases so that whatever's inside the absolute value is going to equal a positive and a negative number, which I'll show you in a second. Then we're going to solve, and then we're going to plug our answers back in and check for extra or extraneous solutions. Okay, so let's do an example to see if we can start making this make sense. All right, so we have 2 absolute value of 3x minus 1 plus 5 equals 27. All right, so think about absolute value bars kind of like parentheses. So we want to leave the absolute value part here. So we're keeping this part here, and we have to move our other numbers. So we're going to have to get rid of the 2 and get rid of the plus 5. So just like a regular equation, we're going to get rid of the 5 first. So subtract 5 from both sides, and then bring everything down. This should be super familiar. Okay. Now we're going to get rid of the 2 because that's still hanging out here. This is 2 times the absolute value. So to get rid of multiplying, we're just going to divide both sides. And then we've got 3x minus 1 is 11, okay? We've completed the first step. We isolated the absolute value, or got it by itself. Now, what we were talking about before, when I have the absolute value of positive 11, that's going to equal 11. If I have the absolute value of negative 11, that's also going to equal 11, right? So what we need to do is take whatever's inside of our absolute value bars, and we're going to split it into two cases. So our first case is that 3x minus 1 could equal positive 11. Our second case is 3x minus 1 could also be negative 11, okay? That comes from this, case 1, case 2. And then we're solving. So we're going to get two answers for these types of problems, okay? So to solve, we're going to add 1 to each side. We get 3x equals 12. Divide both sides by 3, and we get x equals 4. There's one answer. Same thing over here. Add 1 to each side. 3x equals negative 10. And then divide by 3. And then we like to just leave our answers as fractions. So negative 10 over 3. Okay? Our last step, so we separated them, we solved them. We always have to go back to the beginning and plug it in to make sure that it's true. Okay? So we're going to do that. Our equation was 2 absolute value of 3x minus 1 plus 5 equals 27. Okay? So we're going to plug in 4. 3 times 4 minus 1 plus 5 equals 27. And then we're going to use PEMDAS to solve. So inside, again, absolute value bars we treat like parentheses. So we're going to do this inside part first. So 3 times 4 is 12. And then 12 minus 1 is 11. The absolute value of 11 is just 11. So we can get rid of those bars now. And then 22 plus 5, which is 27. Okay? Following it all through. Same thing with the other one. So, again, we started with this equation. And then we're going to plug in negative 10 over 3. Okay. So, when we're multiplying negative 10 over 3 times 3, that's like 3 over 1, and those 3's just cancel out. So this is negative 10 minus 1. So negative 11. And then the absolute value of negative 11 is just 11. And now it's looking like the other one, right? It's the same thing we had right here. So we know that that is true. Okay? So both of our answers worked. So we're going to keep both of these answers as our solution. This one and this one. Okay? If one of them didn't work, then we would cross out that solution and we would not include that as our answer. In this video, you learned how to solve an absolute value equation and how to check for extraneous solutions. Thanks for watching.